A lot of people don't realize how I plant my fig trees in ground. I don't plant them just directly in ground for a number of reasons. I plant them in pots with the bottoms cut off. My preference is like a 5 gallon nursery pot. Um, I'm fresh out though. I had bought 50 5 gallon nursery pots online some months ago. And I'm out now. I'm down to, I've got these 3 gallon nursery pots that will work. I wouldn't go any smaller than that if you're going to do it this method. So the idea is even the 3 gallon nursery pots are not quite as tall as the 5 gallon. Close though. These things are, look like they're about 14 inches tall. And so, really, all you need, like I recommend, if you're going to plant a fig in ground, um, add a little compost into your hole, along with some natural soil that you've got. Um, don't ever plant them in just straight compost. That's not really good. Um, but so all you really need is like a bag of compost, a nursery pot, 3 or 5 gallon. Prefer the 5 gallon, but threes work. A tarp, and that's just to keep things clean. And then the shovel. I really like the skinny bladed shovel versus the big irrigation shovel with a wide blade. It just works better. So the idea is, at least here in Florida and many other places, just the way the figs grow is, you plant them, say, directly in ground. Um, their roots like to go very shallow. In fact, they'll probably be in there intermingling with your grass roots, right? So they're very shallow. Um, and so if I look over, at my side orchard, that entire side yard is incredibly dry, incredibly dry. I put up a couple of trellises just a few months ago, and I had to dig four 4 foot holes, 4 foot deep holes, even 4 feet down. I mean, I was just throwing powder out of that hole. And so I don't want to just directly plant my trees in the yard and then have to dump just loads of water on my side yard to ensure the roots are getting the water that they need. Because we all know that fig roots travel far and wide, right? So they reach out from the fig tree. And so, like when you go to water, like how far out should you water your tree? Like 10 feet out? And or do you just keep watering right there at the base of the fig tree where all the roots are out away from it? And so, and then how much are you going to have to dump on there to keep your figs going? Um, I don't really like that idea. Um, and I don't want to dump thousands and thousands of gallons of water on my side yard just to keep my figs going. And then the other thing is, I mean, if you think about it, fig roots run shallow, right? Very shallow. And um, that shallow, that first, say, 1 to 3 inches of soil, is the soil that's going to dry out first. And it's also easily going to get soaking wet. You don't even need that much rain to get those first few inches of soil wet. So therefore, you've got that really like kind of container growing issue going where the roots are drying out. They're getting soaking wet. They're drying out. They're soaking wet. I think that in and of itself will cause splitting in figs, especially when they're trying to ripen and the roots are drying and wetting and drying and wetting. So part of the idea about planting them in a bucket is, and you cut the bottom off, right, completely off. So the roots are going to be forced down at least 14 inches. If you get the 5 gallon nursery buckets, it'll take you down 16. I think some of them may even go 18 inches. And so the roots are going to go down 16 to 18 inches before then they exit out of the bucket and spread outwards. And down that far, you're looking at a much more consistent moisture level than you are in that first few inches. In fact, when you're down 14 to 16 inches, I'm not even sure if you got a half inch or even an inch of rain, if that inch of rain is going to make it 16 inches deep into your soil. It's surprising how much water it takes to get really deep down into your soil. So, in a way, it kind of protects them from rain in that sense because the roots are deep enough to avoid most. I mean, if you're going to get a torrential like 6 inches of rain, it's going to get down there to those roots. But it provides a consistency, a moisture consistency that you don't get otherwise. And you know, another benefit I think you get from planting in a bucket with the bottom cut off is there's just something about big roots that like to be a little constrained. If they have no constraints, sometimes that's all they want to do is just grow roots. And you know, you could have a tree in ground for 2 or 3 years, and you're like, it's, you know, up above, I'm not seeing a whole lot there. It's not getting any figs, but down below, it's just like growing roots, just out of control. So, a little bit of constraining on the roots themselves seems to have a pronounced positive effect on the tree above. People go and plant like concrete slabs and stuff like that when they next to their roots in ground when they plant them there. But the bucket does really well, I think, for providing that little bit of a root constraint. And so, I guess you know another possible benefit. So the thing is, I've got all of my figs are planted in nursery pots with the bottoms cut off. I've got numerous figs that people say, don't try to grow those. You're just going to have a splitting nightmare. And I can honestly say I have not had a splitting problem yet. Of course, I haven't got, you know, I haven't been through the torrential, like, say, 6 to 8 inches of rain. I mean, I don't know. I think anything would probably split under those conditions. But it's been fantastic so far. So, anywho, this is all you really need to get started. Just some compost, a tarp, a nursery bucket, and a shovel. So the idea is, and I'll show you here in just a minute, but we're going to dig a hole. I like to dig a hole a little bit deeper than the bucket itself. So let's say if this bucket is 14 inches, I'll dig the hole like maybe 20 inches deep. And then in the bottom of that hole, I will throw in, you know, a couple scoops of compost and, you know, a scoop or two of soil and kind of mix it together and throw in some water to get some water down deep into the hole so I'm not planting in on a dry hole like that. And build it up high enough in the side of the hole that when you place the bucket down into your hole that you dug, that you have about 1 to 2 inches of the bucket lip sticking like above ground level. Okay, so once you've reached that level, you can put your bucket in there. I then side fill around the outside of the bucket because you know your hole's going to be a little bit different shape than your nursery pot, right? So I backfill the around the outside of the bucket, which is, you know, mostly the dry dirt that I had dug out of the hole to begin with. And now it's got dirt all around it, and all we have now left is, say, a nursery pot that is in the ground, sticking out a couple inches from the top, and it's got some nice compost underneath it. And what we'll do then is we'll start adding some dirt and compost. What I do in my, so when I dig my hole, I throw all my dirt onto the tarp. You know, if you throw it into your grass, you just kind of make a mess, right? So a digging tip is have a tarp, lay it out next to your hole, and as you're digging, throw the scoops of dirt onto the tarp. Okay, so it makes it really nice. So before you go adding dirt back inside the pot, you're going to want to, you've got your dirt laid out on the tarp there that you dug out of the hole. I add, oh gosh, a third to maybe even a half a bag of compost to the dirt laying on the tarp, and I'll take a shovel and just kind of turn it over numerous times, mix it together really good. I'll even take the hose and spray it down while it's on the tarp to kind of pre-wet it a little bit and toss it a little more. And then I'll start adding it inside the pot until I've got it high enough inside the pot to where, like so, I'm going to build the soil up inside this pot high enough to where then when I take my, say if it's a 3x9, 4x9 tree pot, set it down, and it's going to say, come up to this level. So you set your tree down in there now, and then you can backfill all the area around the tree with your sand compost mixture. And you don't want to go up over the lip, because we're gonna have a couple of inches sticking above ground on our bucket, right? So your soil level will likely be inside the bucket the same as it is outside. It'll be a couple inches before the top edge here. And so you want to make sure when you have your rooted cutting or little tree that you bought, you're planting, have it also about that level. Put all your compost native dirt mix in here, water it in really good, okay? And then once that tree is now in the bucket, which is now in the ground with the bottom cut off, then I take mulch. I like the shredded wood mulch, and then you've got a couple inches right here that you can pile up the mulch, not only in the bucket, right? You can also pile it in just around the edges of the bucket. It looks very nice, and then you can't even really tell that it's in a bucket, right? It looks just like you have a nice pile of mulch around your tree. I have, let's see, on the side of my house I have 45 figs, different varieties, and of those, it's when I first started planting figs, I did not put those in pots, and they definitely do not grow as well as the other, say, 39 that I have growing in pots. I think it's enough proof to say that this is effective. I also think that it reduces your water needs greatly, because when I water, I'm not having to, water this huge area around the tree, thinking that the roots are growing out this way, because we're forcing our roots to go down. They're going at least 14 to 16 inches down before then they come out of the bottom of the bucket. So when I water, I take the hose and I water directly inside this bucket. In fact, I've got a 4 and a 5 gallon bucket, and usually I'll fill one bucket, be filling one bucket while I'm dumping a bucket on one of my trees. And so what I do is I'll take a 4 or a 5 gallon bucket and dump it right in there. And so, when you're growing a fig in a pot, like many of you do, you've got your drain holes down here at the bottom, right? So typically when you water your tree it's in a pot, it's kind of bad to have a bunch of water coming out the holes, right? Because all your fertilizer and all your good stuff is coming out in that excess water that you put in there. So you have to be very careful to put just enough to where you just see like maybe a drip come out and you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm not putting any more water in that. Well, when you have these buried in ground, with the bottom cut off, you definitely want to overwater that puppy, because what happens is you dump on that, say, 4 or 5 gallon bucket of water onto your tree, and at least here, because we have very fast draining soil, my water disappears immediately, and it's going deep, right? So it goes all the way down here, and continues out past the end of the bucket. And so over time, I'm building up like a water reserve underneath that bucket with all that excess water going straight down at the bottom of the bucket and deep under it. And it's also telling the roots where to go. Assuming all the other ground around it's dry, fig roots know how to find moisture, and they will. And so the roots are going to follow the moisture, and the moisture is going down deep. And it, you know, after it gets through the bottom of the bucket, it'll continue down, but it will spread out a little from there. So you're going to end up getting a root mass that typically is much deeper, 14 to 16 inches deeper. They won't be running right inside your grass roots and mingling with that shallow stuff. Not to mention, I don't know if it really provides any sort of, like, you know, protection against critters and stuff. But if you think about it, that top like 6 to 9 inches of soil is where all the nasty stuff lives, right? I mean, we have mole cricket larvae that live in the ground here. Those things are voracious eaters. They'll eat your roots, and supposedly in some places there's root knot nematodes. Thank God I don't have them here. But there's other just nasty critters that live shallow. Not many of them live deep in the soil. And so I think it's probably beneficial to try to keep your roots out of that danger zone, right? The first probably 6 inches of soil, and instead direct them to go deeper and then spread out. I don't know. They may eventually find their way back to the surface. I really don't know. Figs follow moisture, right? So as long as it's more moist, you know, below the bucket than it is out to the side and above it, I don't see why the roots are going to want to go into a bunch of dry dirt. But anywho, it's been working fantastic for me, and so I thought I'd just share this technique with anybody else that might be interested in doing this. It's worked out fantastic. Like I said, it saves me a lot of water. I don't have to run my sprinkler system for like 6 hours a day to try to get, not to mention, I don't want to put water on my fig leaves either, right? I want to keep the water down around the base of the tree, not on the leaves. So I'll get set up here, and I'll dig a hole and show you how I do it. All right, step one, let's get all our stuff put in place here. Got my buckets, got my tarp, shovel, got some compost. Oh, wonderful, I just broke it open right here. Just a second. Alright, I could not carry all that and my phone at the same time, so we've got it over here now. So I've got my spot picked out. Today we're going to bury a little Calderona. And I have a nice spot for it right between Colonel Littman's Black Cross and Verdino del Nord. So I'm going to lay out the tarp, dig that hole, and I'll show you some video along the way. Okay, and here we go. Here's our little 3-gallon bucket. Like I said, I prefer the 5-gallon, but I ran out. 3-gallon will work in a pinch. Cut the bottom right off that puppy, right? Just used a heavy-duty pair of scissors and cut the bottom off. And now we shall go stick this puppy in the hole. Like I said, though, you want to make sure that this bucket lip is an inch or two above the dirt line. You don't want it buried down into the dirt, so you'll see my dogs are really interested in the hole. They love to dig themselves. Okay, so you'll see that right now this bucket sits too deep, and I did that on purpose because I like to throw little compost, another scoop of dirt in there, and kind of mix it in before I set the pot on there, just so it has something good to grow into. So we'll get that done. Okay, so here you can see we've got it now in the ground. I added a couple scoops of compost and a couple scoops of dirt, mixed them together, and now it's setting again correctly. But you notice there's some big gaps around this, right? So let's take some of the dirt that we dug out that's on the tarp here to keep things clean. And let's backfill these holes, the space around the bucket first. We don't want to throw compost and that in around the edges. We just want to throw our native dirt in there. We'll save the good stuff for in the middle. Okay, so here you can see I dumped some compost in on the dirt there. I'm going to mix it up really good. And we'll start adding it in there until we reach the proper height for this big pot here. Okay, so I'll do that right now. Okay, so now we've got it to proper height. And I filled it all around. So I placed the tree in there. I put dirt all around it, trying to ensure that it stays level. And then I went and got a 4-gallon bucket of water and poured it on here, because you definitely need to make sure you water them well. You want to make sure the soil settles properly and doesn't leave big air pockets where you don't want them. And as you can see, like I had this filled to the edge, and you can see it's actually dropped considerably just from settling on the inside of the bucket, as well as there's a couple of holes it left on the outside where the water had kind of cleaned it out. And I'm going to just take a little bit of dirt and kind of fill in some of these little areas. And then the next step is I'm just going to grab a little shredded tree bark and put it around here, and it's going to look really good. Okay, so just one moment. Okay, and then the last step was just to put a little mulch around it to try to conserve some moisture. So I just lay a little, about a 3 to 4 inch bed of shredded wood under the trees. They seem to really like that. But so now we have a newly planted Calderona in a pot with the bottom cut off. You can see actually on some of these where I need to actually add more mulch. As you know, mulch kind of wears out after a while and you have to refurbish it. But you can see here I planted this one about a year ago, and you can see where the mulch is like kind of worn away, and you can see the bucket that it's buried in. This one actually was buried in a 3-gallon pot as well. This is Verdino del Nord. This Colonel Littman's Black Cross was also buried in a 3-gallon pot. You can't really see it right now, though. It's still got enough mulch on it, hiding it. This Adriatic JH, it was actually buried in a 5-gallon bucket, the Home Depot one. Actually, I bought it at Home Depot, but it was, one that was good for storing food safe, I think, whatever, 5-gallon bucket. But those 5-gallon buckets, they can get kind of expensive, really. I mean, well, it depends on how many trees you're planting, of course. I've got 56 trees. And those buckets, I mean, they're not crazy, but they're $3 to $4, for the food grade safe ones. So that gets expensive here, multiply it times 56. What I ended up doing is I bought bulk online 50 5-gallon nursery buckets, which I think they worked out fantastic. It's like the perfect size. These that I just used here are 3-gallon, so the 5 gallons are obviously a little bit bigger around, and they're a little bit taller too. So either way, though, I think 3 and 5s work perfectly fine. But I think another benefit, really, I'm standing over here in the shade. Another benefit, I think, from planting in a bucket when you're growing in ground is, if you think about it, the fig roots really spread out far and wide, right? So if I was growing here in my yard, like, and I'm letting these roots just go far and wide, like, where do I fertilize? Do I fertilize, out in my grass in big circles, and it would look stupid with big dark circles around in my grass? Like, I didn't want to deal with any of that weirdness. And plus, like, trying to water, like, I don't want to dump mass quantities of water on my backyard too, like I said. So I like the idea of the bucket in that I can focus my water into the bucket, all of it inside the bucket, and it all goes directly down into the ground, and the roots are going to follow the water, right? So the roots are going deep. And not only that, when it's time to fertilize, I typically use water soluble, although occasionally an Osmocote application works well. Is that it's all inside the bucket area, right? So not this big ring area I'm talking about in here. Let's see, you can see here. You can see this was a 5-gallon bucket that I had buried in ground. Right, so when I water, it's inside the bucket area. All of these trees are the same way. And when it's time to fertilize, I'll apply the fertilizer inside the bucket area. And so when I water deeply. It's going to carry not only the water, but the nutrients down, straight down where the roots are, down there. I don't have to worry about applying fertilizer and water clear the hell out here, or it's going to make my yard look funky. And it works great. I mean, I have no complaints. In fact, all of my trees, but 6 are in pots with the bottoms cut off, and they are all excelling very well. Versus the first few that I planted, I did not plant them in pots, and you can certainly tell that they don't do quite as well as the ones planted in pots. I think also when they're in pots, and if you're in dry ground, the ground around your figs, that dry ground, is stealing the moisture away from your figs, right? So when you go to water it, you got a bunch of really dry ground, like over here, it's just pulling the water away from your figs. When you're in a bucket, it's refined, right? It's going to stay here. There's no water transfer between inside your bucket and outside. It's going to go straight down in the ground, and your roots are going to follow. So again, I think making roots go deeper like that has multiple benefits. Splitting is one of them, because you have a more consistent moisture content, say 16 inches down, than you do in the first few inches of soil. So I think that does make a big difference. And I guarantee you, I use a fraction of the water to water my figs than I would if they were just free planted out in my backyard. I would have to be dumping tons of water on my backyard, and I do not. I only run my sprinklers twice a week for about 30 minutes a station, and my backyard is usually suffering because it's so dry, at least over here on the side. But my figs don't suffer, right, because I water them directly inside the buckets, and it works out well. I recommend you give it a try. It works fantastic.